Christ consciousness is not a person. It is actually a state of consciousness. It is a state of consciousness where ego dies on the cross of time and space. So the true meaning of the cross is time, which is horizontal, and the true meaning of cross is time, which is horizontal, and space, which is, you could say, vertical, the now, the present. So Christ is a consciousness beyond time and space. Beyond time and space, when the ego dies in the time and space, and the Christ is born, the higher consciousness is born when the ego dies on the cross of time and space. So essentially, Christ consciousness has to do with the present, with the ego crucifixion, with the death of the ego, and stepping into the present, into the now. Yeah, that is stepping into the now. So personality, the ego, the personality disappears. The limited personality disappears. Because in the previous states of consciousness, in our light, in our love, and unity, they're already spiritual states of consciousness, but there's still a person here, there's still somebody here, and therefore the Christ consciousness is beyond the person, the body mind, and beyond the personal energy field. Usually I say it is beyond your chakras. For those in the yogic and spiritual background, they tend to mingle too much with their chakras and their own energy field. And the next step to move beyond that is to leave your personal chakras, your personal energy field, and to go beyond this energy system, beyond this personality, into a higher state of consciousness, which is presence and Christ consciousness. So essentially, Christ consciousness means that the personality steps aside, it becomes less relevant, and the being becomes more important. So it's a shift from personality to being. This is what happens most commonly. A deeper meaning of Christ consciousness is the I am presence. It's this glorious I am presence, which is as it is known in Ascension teachings, it is the I am presence is the individuated God, God in the individuated form. So this is in the Ascension teachings, that I am presence or Christ consciousness is God in the individuated form, in the individuated self. And therefore in Christian tradition as well, Christ is the Son of God or the daughter of God. Why not? Not only Son of God, the daughter of God. So it's the individuated being. So from the God self, then there is the Christ self, whether male or female, it doesn't matter. Yeah, so that is the like taking on a form, taking on a form. And when the God self takes on a form, that is the Christ itself. The Christ itself. And the Christ itself is the original form. It is the perfected blueprint of the perfected being. Not only human being, but of course, since everyone on this planet is human, so in this regards, we can say it's a perfected human being. But, in a larger extent, if there is other types of beings, it is still the same thing. For them, it's also the Christ self, because it's perfected, individuated being in the universe. So whether one looks human or not, it's the same. It's the perfected being, the perfected blueprint of total perfection. So the God self, decided to experience the universe through many individuated selves. So that's how the souls are born, and they take on the individuated forms. And these individuated forms are the Christ selves. They're at the highest dimensional level, as where the form is created, and therefore it's the most perfect being. So actually, in human history, there are many examples, such as Jesus, the Christ, and it couldn't be more similar to that than Krishna. It's just Indian flavor. The Christ in India, Krishna. And in a way, Buddha too, Buddha, it means awakened one, the perfected one, awakened one. So all these great beings in the history have shown the perfected nature of being. And that is the Christ self. Of course, in the Christian story, there is this journey of how Jesus, the person, was going through awakening process, and he died on the cross, which is symbolic. I don't know if it actually happened, but it's usually more symbolic. It's the death of ego into the perfected self. And in that moment, he became not only the Son of God, but he became God self, one with God as God. So he was reborn to be one with God as God. And a similar way in Buddha's journey, he was going through his awakening journey of realization of the nature of suffering, and practicing all sorts of austerities and trying literally any possible practice, yogic practice and meditative practice. And similarly, very interestingly, the awakening for Buddha into the Buddha nature was through the musical instrument of a string, which represented the middle way. So in the Christianity, is a cross of time and space, and in Buddhism there is the middle way, which represents neither left nor right, neither too much nor too little. It's the middle way. Huh? So here we go. That's another similarity. And therefore that realization for Buddha was awakening into the Buddha nature, into the God self, into the awakened one. So Jesus was a person like Siddhartha Gautama was, a Buddha person. We can say Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, or Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ, or simply Krishna, as he was known. And all of these beings were examples of the perfected self, of the perfected being. And of course, they were the biggest examples for the whole world, but there are many, many, many other examples. Yeah, throughout human history, there are so many beautiful beings, beautiful sages, awakened beings who have come to self-realization. So actually, anybody who goes through the process of this personality, releasing personality, letting go of the ego, everybody gets in touch with their Christ self. And it's a very common thing, actually. It's a very common thing. It's not so unusual, actually, after all. Where does it happen? At which level of consciousness? It happens at the level of consciousness of presence. Yeah, when the person has not only has opened up to presence, but actually has underwent like a few challenging cycles of the lowest nature of the pull of the time and space, so to speak, and has come to this place of relief, of lightness, of rebirth. And that usually happens in the middle of the presence consciousness. On a scale of 1000, it's around 650. So that's when a person comes to their Christ consciousness. And in a practical sense, in our community, there is over, we haven't checked specifically at, as a Christ consciousness, but there would be probably more than 30 people who have went into Christ consciousness or above, meaning the mid levels of presence and above. So it's quite a common thing, really. And for many people, it happens quite naturally. For many people, it's not so not so dramatic, like the journey of Jesus, and so on. It's not as dramatic, for some people, it's a bit dramatic in a way that their ego is kicking in, and these difficult things come up, and it's hard to surrender and overcome the obstacles. But I would say maybe for 3 or 4 people out of 10, it's a little bit more kind of dramatic in their personal way, according to their personal challenges. Maybe for 3 or 4 people out of 10. But for the others, it's pretty smooth transition. It's essentially just meeting these deeper pulls and deeper places within them, and just holding their presence to allow these things to go through, to flow through them, to scrub through them. And the tree of presence, like the wind shakes you up a bit, and so these deep challenging things flow through, and as they do, you gain certain maturity and certain strength, and thus comes this a wave of relief, and that is, we can say, a certain rebirth. It's a rebirth. I remember a few people who very those who have their third eye a bit more active, who have a gift of seeing, they actually do see this Christ way, the journey as such. As some people do see it like some they get some experience, but this is minority, this is minority. But it's a confirmation that actually they did see, like, laying on the floor and with their arms spread out and feeling that they're dying on the cross. I would say maybe there were like 3 or 4 people like that that had like this kind of experience. I remember some people had images of Jesus, and they felt that they're so connected and they're kind of dying as such. A couple of people saw it like that. But some people who are a bit more into ascension way, they have seen visually, like this we can say a beautiful white, light blue consciousness. It's not so much as an energy, but it's because inner light looks a bit similar, but it's on a much higher level and vibration, like this very light blue energy emanating from the source, and they're kind of just going into it and being reborn, and that's their experience of the Christ self. But this is minority, I would say maybe 2-3 people out of 10 would have like this sort of a complete visual journey. However, the other 70% or even more of people who go through it, it's pretty simple, really. It's just feeling. It's about feeling. It's not about seeing anything. It's not about any religions of Christianity or Buddhism and so on. It's not even any ascension, New Age way. It's just about feeling. It's a feeling of meeting something very deep, something challenging personally, as a personality, as the mind holding on, and just surrendering. Yeah, this is the big key word: surrendering. This holding, surrendering, like trying to hold on to something, surrendering, and in a way like beautifully surrendering and beautifully. The word dying is a bit, maybe a bit heavy, but releasing. Yes, that's the word. Surrendering and releasing the holding. And if you have associations of dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. You can dramatize it as much as you want, but it's just releasing, of holding, and that's it. And then it's like, oh, I did it, and oh, now I feel so much lighter. Yeah, so that's what it is, and it's pretty simple, really. The whole thing is pretty simple. So it kind of, I would say there are unique cases, maybe 2-3 people out of 10 have a bit more visual and maybe related to their particular ascension path or religious background. They have a bit more this sort of visual, experiential style of surrendering their ego and personality. While majority of people, it's just about that releasing. And it's so good to know that it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's just about releasing. That's what it is. And if we know that, if you know that, then it's easy. Of course, if you kind of read, books about it, and then make pictures in your head and imagine how it's gonna be, and then you get your cross ready and your clothes ready, and you invite everybody, today I'm gonna die, guys, and then you make a whole, drama out of it. So, you do what you want to do, and then if you think about death and what it means, and it's all in the head. It's totally up to your background, your beliefs, and your idealizations and exaggerations, and it's all about that. And you can make it as dramatic as you want for yourself, or you can make it as easy as you want for yourself. And usually I try to help people to make it as easy as possible and explain that it's just releasing, and that's all that it is. So this releasing is a natural thing, it's letting go. It's just a deeper letting go, deeper releasing. So that's what happens there. And yes, it is like a rebirth, because then you feel, like this, there's a big relief. It's a big relief from something deep and something that has been very challenging for a while. And it's just like, like a big relief, and you feel so much lighter and fresher and essentially more open and lighter and fresher and more alive, because you're no longer carrying like a burden of time and space and this holding on to, the ego personality very tightly. Yeah, so it's a lighter way of being. And then it's just like literally a step away from non-dual realization, and another step away from awareness realization of what we call the first step of self-realization or enlightenment. So this process of releasing is important as a way of becoming lighter. Yeah, and then it's a lot easier after that, because after that, the Christ consciousness, in a way, it means that it's an individuated, liberated self, but there is still a duality, because you're still a son or daughter of God. You're not, God's self yet. So someone, your I am presence is still here, and there is still, God is the subject and you're the object. So that still remains. And although you feel so connected to God, or so connected to consciousness or the self, but you also feel that there is yourself too, not the one only self, but there is yourself too and the self too. So there's two of you there. Although it's no longer like ego, but there's somebody still here. And you can't kind of pinpoint that that's my mind, that's my thoughts, but it's more subtler and deeper, and that's what Christ consciousness is. So in a way, it's yes, dying from the time and space, which is 4D, fourth dimension, but then you still have your form and shape in a higher way, in a more perfected way, and therefore it's not a complete dissolution of the ego or the I thought or the subject. So what usually happens is that in the Christ consciousness, like in Christianity, there are still certain troubles with the snakes, with the in the Jesus story, with all these Romans and priests and the governments and authorities. So in the story of Jesus, that's where he had his troubles, of with the local authorities. Let's put it this way. Just like most of us have big issues with the local authorities trying to take our liberty away. So the same way, he had his we can say challenges with the world. Yeah, challenges with the world. Because there is still the world and there is still others, and in his case there were these priests and Roman government, military, and so on, who kind of had their way of ruling people, and he was teaching the word of God, and it was not in alignment with what the people in the ruling class were trying to control others. Pretty much like now, spirituality versus the whole the rest of the 3D matrix world. So in a way, we can see many similarities there too, and therefore, coming back to the God self, there is no more issue with the world. There is no more separation with the world. There is no more otherness with the world. So, and that's where, this true oneness is, that all is one, all is myself, and therefore the world is not a trouble anymore. It is as it is, and therefore you function not by resisting and complaining or judging and so on. I'm not saying that Jesus did that, but I'm saying that that generally what happens on the journey. So there's no more issue with the world, because you are the world, and everything is you, and it's part of you, liked and unliked together, and everything that makes sense and everything that doesn't make sense, it's still all part of you, and therefore you find your way with that, because you are that. So that is the God self, we can say, is everything, all of it, and there's no more distinction or separation. So it's a more liberated state. Yeah, so Jesus was one of the Christs, Krishna was another Christ, and Buddha was another one, and well, there has been thousands and I wouldn't say millions of saints, because it doesn't seem so from historical records, but there's many people who have awoken to their higher nature, and of course, Jesus and Krishna and Buddha, they were, you can say, the biggest examples of the perfected self. But anyone can awaken to their Christ itself, and everyone needs to awaken to their Christ itself, because that is a spiritual maturity. It's a higher maturity. It's a certain maturity of consciousness, and everybody needs to wake up to that. And when the whole world will awaken to their Christ itself, we will be on the path of joy and love and oneness with God, as it was in the Garden of Eden, before, in the times of Atlantis, before the fall. So essentially, it's not a secret that there are other civilizations. They're all Christ selves, and they're all God selves. And what do? They live their lives. They are themselves. So many times people ask me, now so many people are awakening, and how the world is gonna look like, if everybody awakens. It's gonna be beautiful. It's just gonna be really beautiful. Everybody will be awakened in oneness, as one with the consciousness, with the self, with God, and everybody's gonna be in alignment with themselves and with the world, as the world, and there will be a lot less problems everywhere, and everybody will express their perfected self more and more. And this perfection of the self is a self-mastery. It's a self-mastery. Nowadays, there are more articles about the true journey of Jesus, that he actually, did go to India, and where he was initiated into Buddhist tradition. He spent many times in many monasteries, and he went to Egypt and was initiated into Egyptian secret Brotherhood of Light. So he went through many countries and got initiations into many traditions and many ways of higher being. So he was perfecting himself until he was called to go back to the town to help people and to show that there is a way. But these people were at a much lower state of consciousness. They could not understand what he has learned in the Himalayas. They could not understand what he has learned in the secret and sacred mystery schools. So he used a language of parables to deliver higher knowledge in a, we can say, local language. Yeah, so that's how it was. And of course, people consider that as a miracle, because somebody's speaking wisely about something bigger than about farming, or about than speaking about the government issues and military issues. Somebody has come and is speaking the word of God, or just the spiritual truth. While in India, it's been for thousands of years that people know the spiritual truths and so on. There's nothing new over there. So when Jesus went there, he was one of these saints over there, not the only one. There were many more at that time, and they were living their lives. But Jesus had a mission in the West, so he went to learn and study and awaken. And of course, he is a very, very important soul as a being. So he came to the West, to these local barbarians, spiritual barbarians, and simply he was teaching the higher truths. It's like similar, like Indian guru would come to the West, and imagine if he would come, in 1800s, or in 1500s, in the Middle Ages. This Indian guru comes in the Dark Ages and says, all is self, awaken your chakras and do this and that, and they'll be like, oh, what's going on? What is he saying? So Jesus was wise to find a way to deliver the message, and not to be thought as somebody crazy from India, or speaking something that nobody can understand. So he found a way wisely how to speak to the local people. And therefore, what's written in the Bible, it's parables. It's these cryptic messages with certain deeper meaning behind them. Yeah, so this was a big mission for him, and it's an important example for the West, and became something big. So it was the right time, the right spot, with done in the right way, and because of his purpose and mission. Of course, we can go deeper into his avatarhood purpose, into the Pisces age, 2000 years ago. So there are cosmic cycles, and he came right in the middle of the cosmic cycle to make a change. So that was a bigger mission that he had, and he did it well. And therefore, he had this bigger purpose, we can say. Yes. So essentially, Christ consciousness also means like this oneness with the world. It's not one as the world. It's oneness with the world. Yeah, so he was one with people, one with the world, but well, let's now leave Jesus apart. But what usually happens is that there's still the subject object, but it's so close that you literally feel the presence of God or feel the presence of self all the time within you or next to you. So God is always with you, next to you, and that's the Christ consciousness. So it's so close. It's so close that it's the closest thing to you, but not as you yet. So therefore, the journey to 1,000 full consciousness is to remove the remaining separations, to remove that distance, to be completely one as the self. Okay, and just a few things to share. Yeah, so essentially, in the Ascension teachings, now let's turn a bit into something a bit more advanced as Ascension teachings. So in the Ascension teachings, the I Am Presence body is composed of pure white flame, sending out long rays of light. And this flame is your real self, the mighty I Am Presence, the full Christ perfection, the full Christ perfection. And these rays, long rays of light shooting out from your being, are the divine mind and love in action. The divine mind and love in action. So these are the rays of light coming out of the I Am Presence body. So these rays are what follow your conscious direction, carrying your thought and producing magical, so to speak, results when consciously directed and held with firm determination, unwavering conscious attention. And the light you thus visualize is the electronic substance known as prana in Hindu tradition. So from your Christ itself, from your I Am Presence, you are beaming the rays of light. I would love to see Jesus, in the church as fully awakened portrayal of the glorified being of light and love. And it's such a shame that they put him on a cross. It's so bad. What are they worshiping? The suffering. They chose to worship the bad part of the journey. It's just the bad part of the journey. Why do you emphasize it so much? What's the point of that? You should show the glory of the Christ. These rays of light beaming out, and you should teach people what that is, to be awakened, and to be in your full power, love, and divine mind. Yes, that's what should be taught in church. So Christianity is not all wrong, but a lot of things are wrong. But if they would fix it, it would be pretty good. Yeah, they could do it well. Yeah, so this light emanating is the prana, is the life force energy. And this light is directed by thought, by the divine mind. Yeah, so it's a conscious, unwavering, determined direction. So it means that you have a complete mastery of your light and you're directing it consciously into creation. Yes, and thus there are amazing things going on. Yeah, so that's the alchemy of light. So the divine love is presence, intelligence, a principle, a power, activity, and a substance of this higher energy. That's what it is. And when it's consciously directed, it produces amazing things. It helps people in so many ways. So this power as well, it's not like, somebody is sitting on a chair and like, It's not exactly like that either, because it's although some places depicted as that, the almighty, powerful being. It's actually, it doesn't require terrific effort. In fact, it requires just the opposite. It is calm, steady, determined, conscious knowing. Yeah, it is an absolute certainty of the wonder of the light and love. I will repeat this, it's the absolute certainty of the wonder of the light and love. So the ego has no kind of spot anymore there, like, oh, maybe it's not. Maybe I shouldn't do this, maybe I don't know what I'm doing, like trying to sabotage. No, just, flick it out and you know what you're doing. You're standing in light and love. It's unwavering. It's an absolute certainty, knowing the way of God, knowing the way of the universe. So as this becomes a fixed consciousness or an absolute certainty in one's own awareness, he will find more and more instantaneous response to this universal principle of life. So this is how the mighty I Am Presence is in the universe. And it is only the meek human nature that is preventing the glory of the self to be here. It is only the meek and doubtful human mind and the ego doubts and self-sabotages that prevent this electrical force of the universe to flow forth and do what it needs to do. It's like, imagine you have electrical cable and then you cut it in half and you put a wooden block in between. It's not going to flow. Electricity is not going to go that way. Yeah, it just doesn't work. So basically the ego is like putting the brakes on God, putting the brakes on the power of the self. Yeah, that's what the ego does. And all these, and what's the worst in the human reality is that it's all about imperfection starting here. People believe that they are imperfect. People believe that they have no power. People believe that they can't do anything. And thus it is so. If you cut the cable of God and put a belief that no, I can't do anything, well, it is so. If you join the cables back together, electricity will flow. If you get rid of the ego, you are in your mighty, beautiful, loving self. So therefore you live your life from that place, from the power beyond resistance, from the power beyond doubt. You don't listen to the ego anymore. All it does is lies to you. And there is a little bit of truth in the biblical journey where the snake has seduced the Adam and Eve, and then they fell for it. So it's the same way the ego comes up and it starts to program you. Oh, I'm small, I can't do this, I can't do that, I'm not powerful, I don't know what I'm doing. And it just programs you into limitation. That's what the ego does. And therefore, awakening to the Christ itself is clearly recognizing, oh, that's the snake. And throw it out. I think in one of the movies of the Jesus, it was like that, isn't it? There was like a snake coming up and he's like catching it and throwing it out. Yeah, so that's the meaning behind it. So you can catch the ego and throw it out. Yeah, because it does nothing good for you. And therefore you stay in the truth and love of God. in the truth and love of self. And that's who you are. And do not allow yourself to believe that you are not that. Get rid of that. Because who you are is so magnificent and beautiful and big. And therefore you need a reminder. That's why we're awakening from sleeping. It's not like it never existed before, because that would mean it wouldn't be called awakening. So it is already there, but it needs to be awakened. You need to remember, and you need to reclaim it and reopen it. Yeah, it's not that you don't have, you have it. You just need to reclaim it, reopen it, come back to it. You have it, it's right there. And that is your self, your power. So this really happens, as you go along towards full consciousness, and some people very visually see that and do that, others simply emotionally or energetically go through it. But everybody coming to higher levels of consciousness feel this greater power. And then, of course, it is your mastery of this power and conscious knowing of what it is that makes it more present. So some people, again, don't pay much attention to that. They just, continue in a more ordinary way. But some people really want to learn how to use this ability, this gift of their being. And thus it is the path of ascension. Yes, and therefore it's a mastery of the self. A question from someone who couldn't attend today: if there are more Christs in the universe. Yeah, how many there are Christs in the universe? As many as there are sentient beings. Every soul is a Christ in the universe. Yeah, every soul is a Christ in the universe. And it's just remembering that, coming back to that, reclaiming that. In the higher consciousness and ascension teaching, first you kind of need to open up your inner light, open up your inner love, so that you have a capacity for something bigger. And only then, when you have this inner love openness, only then this power can be, we can say, bestowed upon you. Yeah, only then you're ready, because you have love. So then you're ready. Yeah, it's not for ego. It's not for ego. So when you have love, big things can come. Yeah, because they're not for ego. These are divine gifts. Divine gifts, and they're your gifts. It's just not for the ego. It's for you, but not for the ego. Not for the mind, but it is for you. So therefore, it makes complete sense that the Christ self is at the level of presence, because you learn how to really take care of yourself, of your emotions, how to be present, how not to be too reactive, how not to be too egoic, how not to give yourself into the mind. And therefore the Christ itself, the I Am Presence, descends, means comes down, and makes itself more visible, more knowable. And then, of course, in the self-inquiry way, we don't pay so much attention to the I Am Presence and the energy work. We continue removing the separations of the mind, but we don't work on the big power of this, of ascension. So in the non-duality and self-inquiry, we kind of say, okay, so we have this opening and we are now much closer to the self, and let's remove the remaining separations so that you're open in consciousness. But in ascension teachings, we recognize that at this stage, there is a big power that comes and it becomes available. And if you work with it lovingly and wisely, it is the most amazing thing in your life. And then, of course, we continue towards full consciousness, but more, in combination with energy work. So we continue on opening to full consciousness, but also acknowledging that there is energy, and you can learn to master your way of energy, and therefore you become more empowered. And the empowerment is a great gift, and I give it to everyone who is honest, who is loving, who is dedicated, who is pure of heart. So I share it with everyone. It's because you have it. I remind you how to do that.